So I encourage you to find a way of sitting in which you can be comfortable and still be upright and alert, and letting your body settle, sitting with balance, letting the attention come into the body, just feeling whatever you notice when you just turn your attention inward in that way. Much of the time, we tend to ignore sensations unless they are very strongly pleasant or very strongly unpleasant. So, with mindfulness meditation, we turn the attention towards what's often kind of neutral, and it can be a little tricky at first when you're not used to this to start to just feel the ordinary sensations of the body. So we try to soften, have a sense of releasing any tension. You might find particular points of tightness or tension in the body, or just an overall feeling of stress. And even barring that, to intentionally relax tends to really make a shift in the way the body feels. And then that shift can often influence the mental state, calm the mind as well. There are no guarantees, no sort of magic to this process. Sometimes there's resistance, sometimes tension or stress is more embedded, not not so easily released. But we begin with this intention to soften, and then we bring mindfulness to the result of that effort, not trying to force it or judge it, just seeing what happens. Certainly one of the most common ways of releasing tension is to soften the belly. You might try that. Notice if there's tension there, just breathe and release. Expand the belly. can often also help to relax the jaw, another place we tend to get tight and clench. And then just letting the attention settle on the breath. The breath can be felt at the nostrils, the touch of air coming in and out, or you can feel it as the movement in the chest and belly. It can be helpful to make a soft mental note with the breath in, out. If you're following the breath at the nostrils, or rising, falling, if you're following the breath at the belly. This gives a little bit more form and structure to your practice. Sometimes just sitting and trying to feel the breath can be it's kind of vague, can drift a little bit. So the words can help to ground you in the present moment. It's natural that the mind will wander when we try to pay attention to the breath. Our practice, the challenge of practice is to keep coming back to the breath. So we make a certain effort to stay with the breath, but if we do that in a rigid or in a grasping way, it really doesn't allow for the calming that we are naturally working towards, trying to integrate into our practice. So we have to find a kind of balance between trying to be with the breath, but not struggling, and then not adding a judgment when the mind does wander. Each time we meditate, we have a different mind. The mind is constantly changing. So there's no single strategy we can use. We have to pay attention, be intuitive, start to see what's helpful, what isn't. If the mind is dull, trying to brighten it. If there's agitation, trying to quiet it. But always with a gentleness, a kindness toward ourselves, an understanding that we can't control the mind ultimately. We can train it to be more present. But most of the time, it's going to be somewhat out of our control. All the factors, all the karmic factors that come together for any given moment, any mind moment, are having an effect. So it's important to be accepting, forgiving, compassionate toward ourselves. This unruly mind we have to live with. Not easy for anyone. And then we discover that this attitude of acceptance and kindness can actually be the most useful kind of effort we make, more so than any striving or effort to control. Kindness and acceptance tend to calm the heart much more than striving. right. So, um, I want to go back to, I'm just going to read like a couple of the promises because I want to first talk a little generally. So, I think most of you are familiar with this, but this comes in the page 83 and 84 of the Alcoholics Anonymous book. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness, not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it, comprehend the word serenity and know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. So it's odd to me that they separate the line, we will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it, from no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. Maybe some of you have some insight into why they would put something in between them, which is we will comprehend the word serenity and will know peace, because they seem to be directly related. Not regret the past, and then we'll see how our experience can benefit others. In any case, I just wanted to comment on that because it's always struck me. And at times when I have kind of tried to recite the steps, I have gotten them mixed up and done that very thing, like connect those two. In any case, I'm going to read from my Daily Reflections book. Hold it up for the people. And this is from September again, September 14th. And that means any September 14th. Not this year, last year, next year, any year. It's always September 14th. I know, mind-blowing, isn't it? It's the amazing thing. So September 14th, our experience can benefit others. One of the core principles of 12-step recovery is, quote, carrying the message, unquote, a term found in step 12. Here in step 9, it appears as one of the promises. That's because this stage of our step work is so challenging, and it's important to feel that there's a purpose in it beyond our personal recovery. It's hard to look back at our lives as we do in a fourth step inventory, making an unvarnished examination of all the mistakes we made. It's easy to fall into despair, guilt, and regret. We can get the idea that we've wasted years of our lives chasing a high or running from reality. The promise that those mistakes may ultimately help someone else can be a source of comfort and help pull us out of negativity. The truth of this claim is self-evident. Every time we share with a newcomer, every time we work with the sponsee, every time we tell our story in a meeting, we are validating it. Further, our encounters with suffering softened our hearts and made us more compassionate, understanding, and forgiving. The Buddha, too, made unwise choices that informed his teaching later. His spiritual journey took him down the self-destructive path of extreme asceticism. The description of his efforts to, for instance, limit food intake sounds like anorexia. And in his earlier life, he had pursued sensual pleasure as the key to happiness. He discovered that neither of these extremes brought freedom, and thus described his teachings as the middle way, the middle way between these two poles. Had he not gone to those extremes, he would never have formulated this wise model for spiritual development. He would never have had a message to carry. Today, consider the ways that your experience has been and could be of benefit to others. First, reading that, it is, I think, really interesting to reflect on on the story of the Buddha's life uh, as a kind of parallel to the story of an addict. It is not unreasonable to describe some of his behavior as dysfunctional or addictive. There's the stories about his life in the kind of palace as a prince are somewhat vague, but there is the implication that he participated in some serious debauchery. There's a story of one morning when he woke up and found all these people like passed out, and they were like drooling kind of and like and it sounds so familiar to anybody who's like, at some kind of all-night party where everybody got drunk and passed out, and and of course in the suttas it's taken as like, oh, he saw like how, you know, dukkha was, that suffering came from trying to have this sensual pleasure. But clearly he didn't get that message right away. And I've also read things that suggest that he had, if not multiple wives, like concubines. Um, so I guess he really, again, it's kind of left uh, unsaid, but implied that, that he really explored sexuality pretty extensively and sort of, you know, was very caught up in lust as a young man. And that he eventually really saw that that was just n- not satisfying, it just could never really satisfy him. Um, and so that very much informs his teaching. I mean, when he talks a great deal about uh, letting go of striving for sensual pleasure. Uh, and if he hadn't sort of experienced that, uh, he wouldn't know that. I mean, it's one of the ways that I've sort of come to understand, or at least believe, why Buddhism has taken hold in contemporary Western culture is because we've had so much comfort and the opportunity to uh, explore uh, pleasure to the greatest degree, and and then thereby able to find the limits of that, and the ultimately unsatisfactory quality of striving for sensual pleasure. Because if you are poor and sort of living a very uncomfortable life, uh, hungry and, not well clothed or well housed or housed at all, that then it doesn't really make sense to say, oh, I need to let go of striving for sensual pleasure because, you don't have much, Um, so in a way, Buddhism is sort of well suited to uh, an affluent culture. And, and the Buddha, as we know, again, came out of, uh, some degree of wealth and comfort for his time. So, he wasn't someone who was, uh, coming out of poverty. Um, I mean, I'm not sure that has anything to do with this part of the promises, but I want to also then talk about the other side of his striving, this asceticism. It's pretty shocking when you read the suttas, and for the sutta study class, we'll have to pull out the sutta where he talks about getting uh, starving himself, uh, where he was eating 1 grain of rice a day, and that he got so skinny that if he touched his navel, he would feel his backbone. You know, there's a famous uh, image of the Buddha, a Buddha Rupa, where that shows him as the starving Buddha, as just like the ribs are just sticking out. So again, he was, although this is depicted, traditionally seen as, a misguided kind of spiritual search, which we're, if you, we see this in different religions. I think in the Da Vinci Code, the character is like whipping himself, right? That's sort of like a medieval Catholic penance behavior. Is very similar, right? Wearing hair shirts and all these things, very similar to what the Buddha was doing, although there's a different logic to it. I mean, but the Buddha is trying to figure out how to like let go, basically, and but from the standpoint of recovering addicts, and some of you, I'm sure, your prime addiction, or maybe just your secondary addiction, but was around food. We know how that anorexia is another form of an addiction, which I don't know a lot about it, but just the sort of body dysmorphia, not understanding, not really seeing your own body. But my point being that, maybe we can say the Buddha was this was a spiritual search, but maybe there's also something dysfunctional in him. Maybe he was kind of an addict, that he went from one extreme to the other in his life. And it's not something I would promote beyond, or really talk about beyond a group like this that could kind of hear that and think about it, in a useful way. To go out and say, oh, well, the Buddha was an addict because he did this, it would just annoy people, I think. I don't think they want to hear that, because it'd be like, oh, you guys, you addicts want everybody to be an addict. It's like, yeah, well, guess what? But for us, among us, I think we can talk about this and sort of see like, yeah, there's something a little off there. But again, coming back to this promise, look what he did with that, right? And, and it seems like he needed to go to those extremes in order to find the path. And indeed, when he goes to, after his enlightenment, and he goes and he finds the 5 other ascetics he'd been traveling with and practicing with, the first thing he addresses is these extremes. The first thing he says before he gives any teaching on the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, first thing he says is, there is this ignoble, not noble path, which is striving for sensual pleasure. But there is also this ignoble path, which is rejecting all, physical comfort, and that neither of them works. And of course, he's speaking from experience, right? His experience can benefit others. He wouldn't, if he had said that, it would be like somebody who's not an alcoholic coming into an AA meeting and trying to tell you what you should do about your addiction. It's like, well, what do you know about it? You haven't been there. Well, he had been there to these two extremes, and they knew that. And it was how he got through to them, because they believed in asceticism. And they believed that by eating a healthy meal, he had gone soft. And so he had to address that with them. So, but he was able to do that because me, right? You've seen me. And so that it very much is how that worked for the Buddha, and indeed as a meditation teacher myself, I mean, you guys know me like uh, what I teach is what I've experienced, and it is a huge comfort, right? And this is the beauty of the 12 steps. Uh, it's a huge comfort to be able to make use of the things you did in your life that are like, oh God, not so good. Wish I hadn't done that. But to be able to, to see how it can be of benefit to others is so rewarding and really, flips the whole typical way of thinking about it. So, it really um, after I had first like gotten to step 12 and started to, try to sponsor people and be of service, kind of like uh, do service in the program. And I, immediately, as most people do, like just experience this great joy from it. I was like, oh, these steps are, they're very smart. Like, they don't tell you why you should do this. They just say, this is what you need to do. You know, you need to write this inventory. You need to make amends. You need to, meditate. You need to carry the message. Just that's if you want to stay sober, that's what you need to do. And then you do it and you realize, wow, like this isn't just keeping me sober. This is transformative, and it opened up this whole like idea. Oh, like helping people, not thinking about myself, being of service, being generous, all of that. And I always think of it as like the steps trick you into living in this way that's really transformative. And and then you're like, oh, right, okay. Now I'm not doing the steps. Like people will say to me sometimes, well, do you still work the steps, or what step are you working on? I'm like, well, that's, once you embrace them and take them on in your life, that's just what your life is. Your life is just made up of these things. It's just made up of the honesty, the letting go, the acceptance, the self, inventory, the self-questioning, self uh, examination, the amends, you know, and being of service. It's just like that's what your life becomes, and not that it's like, oh yeah, that's I'm just this perfect step, machine or something that's just so, but that it just becomes integrated, right? Because you realize it, although on this one level, in this initial level, oh, it's a really great set of tools for sort of establishing a clean and sober life or life in recovery. It's actually this great way of living that brings great, you know, uh, happiness. I mean, and it brings wholeness, a sense of completeness to your life, and integrity. That is precious, and it's not that it stops being about the substances, but it just expands way beyond that. And it's one of the reasons why many of us sort of feel like, "Oh, we wish we could carry the steps outside to the greater, society, to the greater population." And one of the reasons I wish that more people in the Buddhist world would read my books and see like, oh, like what he's saying, actually, this is a helpful way to like be a Buddhist practitioner. Because I think that what the steps, I mean, obviously, it's like what I do, right? It's like when you look at this combined with the Dharma, the steps give you this really explicit way of doing certain things that the Dharma at least implies, but doesn't necessarily demand of you. And that's the thing, of course, because if you're an alcoholic or an addict and you're coming into the steps, you're doing it because you have to. and that demand, that need, pushes you to do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do. It's one of the things when I was writing Burning Desire about higher power, that I realized that when you think of the Dharma, if you put it in the place of God, that it gives a kind of power and meaning to the Dharma that goes beyond just like, oh, I take refuge in the Dharma. Okay. But like, what if you're saying that like the Dharma is your God? Like, wait a second, like that kind of, turn my will and my life over to the care of the Dharma. That has to me, again, a sort of seriousness that isn't necessarily, people kind of like go to Spirit Rock or go to meditate, like, okay, I'm taking refuge. But we as addicts have to take refuge because it's life or death, and that puts a finer point on refuge that isn't quite there if you're kind of a casual, what are they called? A nightstand Buddhist, somebody who keeps all their Buddhist books on the nightstand, that it doesn't. And again, I'm kind of maybe, creating a straw man sort of, or straw person argument like that but it's a tendency I have to sort of like think that there's this, I think of this sort of Buddhist light world that I've seen that that could use a little juice, and I feel like we got a lot of juice here. But what a joy coming back to this promise. What a joy, and what a relief in life to realize, oh, and I'm sure many people, who aren't addicts have that same experience, but realize, oh, I've kind of, now the things that I did, I can share them in a way that it's gonna help people. I mean, it's kind of what every parent tries to do with their kids, but it doesn't quite work the same way with kids. Trying to help them to avoid the mistakes we made. But certainly in the recovery world, it's such a great resource to be able to share your experience with somebody who really wants to hear it. So, so there you go. My thoughts for this June evening. If anybody wants to join in or say something or, ask something, you are invited to do so.
I'll say that it is a lot of juice. You filled my head and my heart with more than enough. They're just exploding, imploding. I'm not sure which. But thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Yeah. Well, sometimes I get excited. It's yeah. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about talking about and sharing about the Dharma, or really any spiritual teachings, but that just by talking about it, it's like activates it, right? So it's interesting. I noticed a long time ago that certain topics, if I would give a Dharma talk on joy, for instance, there would just be this like uplift in the room. And then if I would give a Dharma talk on like dukkha or death or something, it'd be like, oh God, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Dolores, hello.
Okay. Hi, Kevin. I just want to say ditto everything that was just said to you. I'm learning so much reading your book and listening. And I did finally got the book for, I don't know how to say Bodhi, the Bodhi book.
Bhikkhu Bodhi.
Oh my goodness. And I just read last night about the middle way that you were talking, the middle way. And when he says that it's so useless by punishing our bodies, it's so useless. It's self-defeating because we need our bodies, it's
Right.
a necessary instrument, so that really, when you brought that up again and talked about it, it reminded me of that. I just want to say something about your first question at the beginning when you said, why is this sentence, in the promises?
Yeah.
Why do they have that there? And I am going through a wonderful period of recovery right now. And my first thought was, because the first two sentences, that's what gives us the freedom, like putting down the alcohol or the food or the inappropriate sex or whatever it is. There's such a happiness and freedom in that. And letting go of the past. Like I heard somebody say, forgiveness is not trying to change the past.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I believe those two sentences enables us to do the rest. In other words, to be free of the chemical or whatever, and to let go and have the capacity to love those people back there. Like my mother and father didn't lay in bed in the morning and say, how are we going to torture Dolores today? It was just, they were acting out of their own dysfunction. It was not intentional. And like you said about why are they saying and close the door on it? Since I have experienced this new surrender, I actually hated them. I was consumed with it.
Mm-hmm.
And to feel that freedom, I can go back there and I could learn what happened to me. Like one memory that I had this week was, and I'm not saying this in judgment, blame, or criticism, my parents didn't know how to sit down and have a one-on-one with a kid.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I don't ever remember them saying, how did your day go? How was school or whatever? And that was a loneliness inside of me. I wanted that connection with someone.
Yeah.
I wanted someone to be interested, to be, to love me and be interested in me, So, but like I'm reflecting on the past and getting awarenesses of why I became what I became. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think people, I know parenting has changed a lot in the last couple generations.
Yes.
Yeah. Certainly my parents didn't know how to,
Yeah.
be friendly or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Dolores.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to let Rachel jump in here. Hi.
Hi. So I really appreciate not only everything you do, but what you had to say about working the steps as opposed to living the steps in your daily life.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that just resonates so much more. People will say, okay, we're having a step workshop, and that's fine, because it's a place to share information with newcomers or, enhance understanding. But I know I've gotten some looks when I say to people, well, I don't formally work the steps. And the reason for that is I'm trying to live them. I had a counselor in treatment, and we played a game that was kind of like, name that tune, only it was name that step, because she said, no matter what is happening at any point in your day, if something is irritating to you, there's a step that's going to be an answer to that situation. And, I didn't always get the step number right per her interpretation, but that still rings true for me now. If I'm irritated by something, there's some basic principle here that I can apply to it. That's going to help me with a resolution. So anyway, that's what I have to share. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Rachel. You're in Thailand. You're the person in Thailand. Is that right?
I'm in Thailand.
I love that you come on here on Friday nights. It's great. Appreciate you. Yeah. Um, I wanted to just mention that I thanks to Angela, as always. I got all the latest talks, and they are all on my website and on YouTube. You can either listen or watch and listen. And I'm pretty sure information about them is in the chat somewhere. Wow, there's a lot of different nice links, and I don't mention it much, but I will mention it now that it's great when you can offer me Donna for teaching here. This is the only place that I'm really teaching it all, so whatever you give me is very helpful. And that's you can do that through PayPal and Venmo, which there are links. There are links on here anyway, if you're interested. And so next Friday, for those who only come Fridays, will be the Spirit Rock link. So just for you to know that, that's the second Friday of the month. The only, and someone, did someone say something about, well, as I said, Southern Dharma retreat, which will run from, I think it starts on September 1st, actually, it starts on a Wednesday. Yes, September 1st to September 5th. So it's like the Wednesday before Labor Day. And then and it ends on like at noon on Labor Day. And Southern Dharma, they said they're going to limit, normally they only get about 27 people. They said it's going to be limited to 20, which is even smaller. So it's pretty, once it becomes available, which is going to be July 1st, if you're interested in coming, you're probably going to need to jump on it. It is pretty deep in the mountains in Western North Carolina. Beautiful, beautiful, quiet place. One of those places where maybe occasionally a plane flies over. That's about it. So it's pretty cool. Very rustic. The accommodations are not luxurious. You do not get a private room. It's not Spirit Rock. But and the only other thing I think I have scheduled, I guess I haven't, and I guess I'm just feeling like telling people what's going on, but I've been doing this series on the Eightfold Path for Napa Valley Insight, and that'll be this month. It'll be on the 15th, my brother Michael's birthday, June 15th, and it'll be Right Effort this month. And then in July, I'm doing a little talk for Insight Meditation in Washington, D.C. If you're an East Coast person, it's like the 11th of July at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm getting up early, for me, early. But that's going to be fun because it's one of their teachers is going to sort of like interview me, I think. So I think that'll be interesting. Anyway, I don't have all that stuff on my website. So I will do that. I'll plan to do that this weekend, is update my website with all those things. So boring. We used to call that announcement dukkha. Yes, but there you are. Any final thoughts for anyone tonight?
Hi there, I'm Debbie.
Hey, Debbie.
Hi. I just wanted to share a possibility if people are interested in a retreat more locally here in the fall. There's a wonderful ranch in Sonoma. It's called Westerbeek Ranch. And it's kind of in the hills, also very rustic cottages and accommodations. I have organized other mindfulness day-long retreats there. The last one we did was Aya Santachita. She came down from the Forest Monastery from Placerville, and we did a day long there. And it's a lovely, lovely scenario in the hills of Sonoma. So if you'd be interested, I could kind of check it out, see when they're opening or not, and find out some information to share.
That'd be really cool, Debbie.
Okay.
Yeah, let's yeah, send me some information, and if you want to look into it, you know, let's you and me talk offline or like separately, and like maybe look at it and look at some dates and stuff.
Okay.
That'd be very cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Local.
That's what I need. It really helps when people just like support, you know. So cool.
All right.
All right. Exciting. All right. On that lovely note, there's lots of basketball to be watched this weekend, so or not. The women's U.S. Open is being played in San Francisco this weekend, which is pretty cool, at the Olympic Club, famous golf course. But other than that, just get outside, take a walk, okay? Take care of yourselves. Blessings, everybody.